Hi everybody, my name is Maria Gerlando, and for those of you that do not know, I just represented Canada at Miss Face of Beauty International 2019 this year in the Philippines. I just got back about a week ago and I'm still kind of adjusting back to Canadian Eastern Standard Time, but it was a great experience and I actually placed in the top 20 overall and top 15 in my division, which was the Miss division. And for you today, I just wanted to talk about 5 life lessons and 5 also pageant lessons that I learned throughout my experience. Now, I think that this is relatable whether or not you compete in beauty pageants or not, if you travel, any other competitions that maybe you compete with other people representing different areas. I think that these would be really beneficial for you. And so just right now, I have 5 that I would like to share based on my experience, and I'll give some stories and some context to what I mean by them. So the first one is that it is always better to be prepared and have something that you might not need rather than need something and then not have it. And most times when you go into a pageant or any competition, they will give you a list of things that you have to bring. And it seems like common sense, but just make sure you bring these things. I don't care how early in advance you pack, you want to make sure you have them, because it's different if you're asked to have something and it's something that you weren't asked to bring originally. That's a different story. But if you're specifically asked to bring a set list of things, do your best to bring them. It just shows responsibility and good character. And I don't know how many times I saw girls struggling because they did not have the things that they absolutely needed. And it even came to the point, nerves get the best of everybody in a different way. And I had one contestant not bring an evening gown. So it just makes you realize like where your mindset is at when you're preparing. You're nervous, anxious. Maybe some of the girls maybe they don't travel often and they just didn't really think about it. When you're in a different country, you don't have easy access to the resources that you do at home. So it's always better to be prepared. And I'm just somebody who would rather loan my stuff out. I'm usually pretty good with that, as long as I get it back, rather than feel uncomfortable and have to ask somebody else like, oh, do you mind if I borrow this thing? And it could be something as big and important as an evening gown, or something as small as like a safety pin or double-sided tape. So no matter where you're going, always be prepared and at least know if the area you're going into, you can buy things that maybe you might need. So tip number 1 is to always be prepared. And of course, this applies to beauty pageants and many, many other things. Number 2 is to worry about yourself. And as much as we want to care and help other people out, I noticed that I spent a lot of my energy and my time trying to help other people or realizing what other girls were doing wrong or right. And in the end, I look back and I'm like, it didn't matter. Like, it didn't affect me, and I should not have put so much energy and time into these things. Whether it was girls being on their phones or girls being late or forgetting things, I just felt like I wasted so much of my energy thinking, oh, like I hope the organizers notice that, or I hope that it doesn't hold us up, or I hope it doesn't affect me and when I have to be on time for this, this, and this. And yeah, it just wasn't something that I needed to do, because sometimes things are going to be seen and sometimes they weren't. And then I noticed that when people were getting called into the top 20, I was kind of surprised, because as a contestant, I see so much more than the judges see. And it's okay for people to be late. It's okay for people to be on their phone. And just because that's not something that maybe I do more often, it doesn't mean that it makes somebody a bad person. And this goes for anything in life. Sometimes we're worrying about what other people are doing, and we just need to focus attention on ourselves. And if someone's doing something that you don't agree with or that you don't understand, it doesn't mean that you have to give your energy or give your ideas to that person. Like, just let them be and do your own thing, and it'll just help you stay in a good mindset and in a good headspace. So that's why number 2 is just to worry about yourself, and it won't stress you out as much, especially in pageant competitions, and that it's okay to help other people, but make sure that you are your own priority and that you focus on what you are doing and not what other people around you are doing, because you can't control other people, you can only control yourself. Number 3 is be yourself no matter who is around. And unfortunately, this wasn't something I really thought about until after the pageant. And my context and my story to this was that, especially at an international pageant, there are so many people helping out. And there are people who don't communicate with each other as much just because they're in different places. So we had almost 40 contestants, plus parents, supervisors, national directors, organizers, the CEO, her family, there were a lot of people with us, and we were separated into 2, sometimes 3 buses. So information would get switched based on who you're getting notified by, and sometimes you would get incorrect information. And I just noticed that a couple of the times I was being told things and I would do something based on what one person said, and then it was actually the incorrect thing, and then we would get in trouble or we would get spoken to, and it was sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly. And I just wish that I had spoken up for myself a little bit more, because I found that I was being talked to in certain ways by some, and it wasn't often and it wasn't obviously noticeable, but like sometimes if someone who was a judge was talking to me in a way that I wouldn't not normally agree to being spoken to that way, I felt kind of silenced, because I was like, oh, this person's a judge, I just gotta listen to whatever they say. And that makes me uncomfortable, because just because someone's a judge doesn't mean that I shouldn't have the right to speak and voice my own opinion and be worried like, oh, maybe they're gonna change my score and impact my score based on what I say. But it shouldn't have to be that way. And it's like, now looking at it, it's like, yeah, I placed top 20, but it's not like I won the pageant. You know, I should have just stuck to who I was and stood up for myself and said, you know what, sorry that I did the wrong thing, but there was a little bit of miscommunication, and I just felt so worried about it, and I didn't want to come off like I was complaining or like it wasn't my fault. And in the end, it didn't matter. I should have just stuck to who I was and taken my emotions out of it and said, oh, you know what, I think this is me that did that wrong thing, but you know what, there's a whole group of us that were told something that was incorrect. And it goes to show that there's always going to be situations that you want to speak up about and you want to be yourself about, but sometimes you have a conflict of interest because it's to the judge or to the CEO or to a supervisor. But in the end, it made me realize that I have a certain standard I hold myself to, and I should be respected and treated by that manner. And unfortunately, I didn't stand up for myself in some circumstances where I should have completely. And I don't want to go too much into examples, and it's not like any one person or one person's fault, but it was just kind of like, I'm an adult. If you speak to me, I will listen. I don't do things on my own. I follow the rules. I've been preparing for this for a year. I wouldn't do something incorrect without being told what to do first. And so that was just an example of how you should just be yourself and stick to who you are, no matter who is around. I'd rather be, what's the saying? I'd rather be disliked for who I am than being liked for who I'm not. So that is why tip number 3 is to always be yourself, whether it's in a competition or in your travels, in school, whatever it may be. Be yourself, stick up for yourself if that's something that you would normally do, and don't change who you are just because of other people being around. That was number 3. I've just got a little bit of notes here for my own guidance. Tip number 4 is to research. And this is whether you are traveling to a new country or to a new area, if you are competing in a competition, if you know that certain people are going to be around, if you're working with a certain organization, research what it is that you are doing or where you are going, because it's going to save you so much headache, and you're just going to have a lot more knowledge about the circumstance. So for example, I knew last year that I was going to be competing in an international pageant, and it wasn't until, I don't know, maybe like eight months ago that I learned. So 4 months of preparing, and then I learned that it was going to be in the Philippines. And so what I started to do is look up, how long does it take to get to the Philippines? What is the time change difference? What are some common foods that they eat? What are some common illnesses they experience? What is the weather going to be like at that time? Anything that I could do to help me know what it would be like for my time within the 14 days I was in the Philippines, I researched, because I wanted to be prepared. Again, it goes with tip number 1, is always being prepared. Because especially if you're in a pageant, and if you know the Philippines, it's very hot and humid, you want to find makeup and hair products that are going to last all day. And I would not have known this, and I would have not thought about this. Like, sometimes you might think it's common sense, but it's really not. And it's so important to prepare based on your research. And even there was one day, I said, where we walked into the hotel, we were all exhausted. It was towards the end of the week, and I noticed that the Face of Beauty 2017 winner was there. And I went up, I said hi, kind of fangirled a little bit, because of course she's one of the former queens, and she ended up being a judge, which I think she's done in the past as well. And I had several girls around me, like other contestants, ask, oh, like, who is that? And I was like, okay, it's not like she's not glammed up. Like, she looks very similar to her from her pictures to in person, and the fact that nobody knew who it was, I was like, how do you not know? Like, why would you not research? You have the chance to have an advantage and learn who these people are and get to know the organization, get to know the places that you're at. Why not do that? Another thing was that a lot of the contestants, directors, they didn't like the food. And it wasn't that they didn't like it, it was that we had kind of the same food every day. But again, if you research the Philippines and you know what kind of food to expect, well, then you can know, okay, will I like this? Will I not like this? Do I have a special diet that I need accommodations for that I should tell them about? Or should I just bring snacks? Should I go, a little bit early, go to the store and buy some food that I can eat? So it just helps to be better prepared and in a better mindset, because I just heard a lot of people confused and complaining and getting upset because these were things that they really were out of their control. It was out of their control at that time, but had you prepared and thought about it before, maybe it wouldn't have been such a headache at the time. So wherever you're going, whatever you're doing, research the organization. If we're talking about pageant, research the organization history, the CEO, the past winners, where they're from, just something a little bit. And if you think about it, if you prepare every day, there's no reason why you can't learn a little bit about something every single day. And again, if it's traveling, look up the time zone they're in, look up the language that they speak. If you can learn a couple words in that language, why not try to do that to help yourself out? So that is why tip number 4 is to research, 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 especially in a pageant, especially in traveling. Whatever it is that you're doing, please try and do some research just to help yourself out. Tip number 5 is to be humble and be grateful. And of course, I'm going to relate it back to my own pageant experience because it seems so common. Yes, be humble and be grateful. But it was values that sometimes don't show through when you're focused on yourself and not about the circumstances around you. And I'm just looking at the example I have here. So when we grow up in our own country, we're molded by our experiences, by our life, and by the influences that we have around us. And I was really aware of this when I was around girls who came from all over the world, legitimately. And I had to really realize that just because I don't do something some way, that doesn't mean that another person doing it a different way is wrong, because it's just something that they're taught their whole life. And it's so easy for us to get angry, get negative, and want to critique and control everything, but that's not the way it is. So, for example, we're very lucky to have drinkable tap water in Canada. And I noticed that a lot of the girls were drinking the tap water, and I had to explain to them, like, hey, we're very lucky maybe like in our countries that we can drink the tap water, but we got to be careful here because they are not as well off and they don't have that blessing to have drinkable tap water. And of course, some people wanted to get upset, angry. Now we have to use plastic water bottles. It's inconvenient. There isn't always plastic water bottles to wash your teeth with or wash your face with. But again, it's just a reminder to be humble and realize that what you have at home might not be what everybody around the world has. And especially going to a third world country like the Philippines, it really opened my eyes up to that, to being grateful for just the small things that we have, being able to have street lights and stop signs and street and road rules. Like, that's just something so small that maybe we take for granted and we get road rage about, but there's no need to, because these things are in place for us to stay safe. And in a country where none of that exists, you start to appreciate and realize what you have back home. So those are just 5 rules that I learned, or 5 little life lessons that I learned competing at an international pageant. And I had an amazing time. I do plan on competing internationally again. I don't know when, I don't know where, but I know an opportunity is going to come up sometime in the near future. And I just wanted to share some of my experiences with you. And if you have any tips or advice for me, please let me know. I'd like to hear about it. And I hope to share more of my Face of Beauty pageant experience and other past and future pageant experiences with you on here. Thank you so much.